welcome to be seated. I'd like to invite up Sarah Corman to introduce our speaker for today.
Shabbat Shalom. We're so happy to welcome everyone to our annual inclusion service on Shabbat. We're so glad to see our friends from High. I'm so glad you're all here. The inclusion initiative at Beth Torah is largely due to one person, and that is Zaylene. Zaylene Levitt created this opportunity for us in our synagogue to remove barriers and welcome everyone. We continue to bring awareness of challenges that our members and those who we care about are facing. Today, we're going to have a wonderful speaker, Dr. Elizabeth Woodall. A little bit about her background. She's an experienced instructional leader, and she's worked in education for over 20 years in higher education and grades 1K through 12. She's also a parent of a child who has autism, and she's a former general education teacher and teacher leader. Currently, she works as a lead instructor for Arizona State University and as a clinical field supervisor for UTArlington, where she continues to teach teachers and to prepare them to support students with disabilities in the classroom. How lucky we are to hear from her today.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning. First of all, I want to say, wow, I've only been to a couple of Jewish services, and I forget how beautiful and wonderful they are. And so thank you for letting me be a part of this and to come and to share. So what I want to talk to you guys about specifically, well, first of all, inclusion in your community, but also specifically inclusion of individuals who have autism spectrum disorder, or ASD. So just a little bit about me. I am a wife, I'm a mother, and I'm also an educator. I live here in Dallas with my wonderful husband of 25 years. His name is Andrew. Our two children, Addison, who is 18, and my son, Drew, who is 15. So my husband, Andrew, and my son, Drew, they are here today, if you guys want to give a little wave. So, thank you. Thank you. I'm so glad they're here to support me. So, Drew is 15, and he is autistic. Drew is awesome. He's amazing, and he is my why. He is why I have immersed myself in this work, and I'm so passionate about sharing about autism with the community, because it is so important that we understand the individuals that we interact with. So sharing about autism, it helps to break down stereotypes, supports families, builds empathy, and much, much more, which is why I do it. So as Sarah shared, I've been in education over 20 years, and I have spent most of my career supporting teachers. And recently, my focus has been on supporting teachers in the area of supporting students with disabilities and how to include them in the general education classroom. So my dissertation research focused on ASD and the perceptions of general education teachers and their ability to include them in the mainstream classroom. So I also speak from experience, my experience of how Drew has been included but also not included in our community, and how I've had to advocate for him to make sure that he is getting the same opportunities that his neurotypical peers receive. So I'm going to give you guys a lot of information first, just kind of front load some things, because understanding and the ability to include individuals with autism, you first have to know the characteristics and how to recognize it and what it means, and all of those things. So I'm going to start with a lot of information, but then I want to end with practical tips and practical application. So about 1 in 36 children are diagnosed with ASD, which means there's a high probability that a general education teacher is going to have a student with autism in their classroom, but it's also a high probability that you are going to have individuals in this congregation, in this community that have autism. And so some other things about autism, just some common characteristics and what ASD means and what it is a neurological disorder caused by differences in the brain. It affects how people interact with others, communicate, how they learn, and how they behave. ASD is more common in males. It's genetic, and there is no cure, which is fine. I mean, Drew doesn't need a cure. He's awesome as he is. So there are many, many myths and misconceptions that I wanted to point out, because if you've heard about ASD, you may have heard some of these myths that I'd like to sort of put out here and explain that these are not factually correct. So myth number one would be that autism is a disease, which is simply not true. Autism is not a disease. It's a neurodevelopmental disorder. There are a lot of organizations out there who their main goal is to cure autism, which is it's not a disease to be cured. So Drew, he is so intelligent, and he has done his own research on autism spectrum disorder. And he came to me one time and he said, I've been reading, it's a specific organization that I'm not going to mention, but he was reading all of their kind of research and their doctrine and things of that nature. And he said, their main goal is to cure autism. And I didn't realize that I have a disease to be cured. And it just broke my heart that this is a myth that's perpetuated. And so I just want to share that's not true. Another myth is that autism, or people with autism don't have emotions. This is not true. Although some people with autism have difficulty expressing their emotions, it doesn't mean that they don't feel. And you're going to learn in a minute about the differences and how one person with autism is completely different than another person with autism. And so it's just not true that people with autism don't have emotions. A big myth that's kind of controversial, but this is what I believe and I want to share, is that many people say that autism is caused by vaccines. There is no credible research to support this. The truth is that autism is caused by several gene changes or gene mutations. It's not caused by vaccines. It's a very complex disorder. And although doctors have not been able to pinpoint one particular reason, they have been able to debunk the one study that came out that vaccines cause autism. And so I can share more information about that, some of the research, if you'd like me to. Later I can share it with Sarah, and she can share it with you. So although no two people with autism are the same, there are common characteristics. These characteristics include repeating words and phrases, repetitive movements known as stimming, and this may look like flapping, spinning, twirling their fingers, humming. There's also a characteristic, and you see this in many individuals with autism, which is a focus or a preoccupation with specific topics. So really laser focused and interested in what they're interested in, maybe not what's around them, not really being aware of that. So another characteristic is unusual reactions in social settings, and then flat speech. But not every person with autism, it's not a checklist. You can't say, oh, they don't have flat speech, so they don't have autism. It's a spectrum. It's each person with autism is different. There is a saying that if you've met one autistic person, you have met one autistic person, because they are so different. And I want to introduce two visuals in just a second. Lorna Wing introduced the autism spectrum concept in the 1970s. And this thinking was groundbreaking. It was progressive. we owe a lot to Lorna Wing. And her concept was that you were either, it was visualized by continuum. So let me show you this. And I have a couple of copies if you can't see. But the one at the top is kind of Lorna Wing's envision of what autism is as a spectrum. And you notice that it starts here on the left, and you see severe autism, or low functioning, as you may hear, middle functioning, and then there's high functioning autism. And so this was, like I said, this is amazing. It's a great concept because it just shows that not one person is one thing. They can be, they can be different levels of autism. But a more accurate representation of the spectrum looks like this. It's an equalizer. And there's lots of different ways to show this. But the reason it's more accurate than a spectrum, it's still a spectrum, but what you notice here, it's like dials on a stereo system. So at the bottom, and you can put lots of things at the bottom, but here it says emotion, biological, sensory, cognitive, communication, and social. So if you hear the term, for example, Drew, I hope you don't mind, I'm going to share about you. Drew has always been considered high functioning. His teachers, doctors, they have referred to him as high functioning. If a teacher hears this or another person hears this, they might think, oh, he's high functioning, he doesn't need support. He's smart, he doesn't really need any extra support. And he's grown a lot, but if we had really looked at this as a whole person, we would have seen that his cognitive was extremely high functioning, but his social and his communication was very low functioning. And so just because he was high functioning, it didn't mean that he didn't need that extra support. So this would be a more accurate representation. Another example could be a nonverbal example. So I don't know if you've ever met an autistic person who is nonverbal. In society, traditionally, a nonverbal person with autism would be considered low functioning. And just because they can't speak, we have no idea what is in their mind and the things that they could share or say. And so it's sort of dangerous and maybe a little offensive to label someone as high or low functioning autism. And so I think a better way of thinking about this is we should consider describing individuals as needing limited or no assistance to needing more significant assistance. So that was a lot of information, and but I think that to be inclusive of individuals with ASD, it's so important to understand what it is and how it impacts individuals. So I'm just going to end talking about practical application, and then I am extremely conversationalist, and I'd love to hear from you guys. So I spoke with Rabbi Sidney, and we talked a lot about some of the things that I would already recommend that are already here in place, which I thought was so impressive because you don't see this anywhere. She talked about the quiet library, the sensory spaces, the places that individuals with not just autism but disabilities, or even someone who is neurotypical who may need a little bit of a break from the noise, has a place to go. And so I think that is amazing. I think one of the, best things, best ways to include individuals with autism is really to be curious and to be interested in what they have to say and what they're interested in. So another big consideration to think about is differentiation and options when planning activities and community events. So I'm going to give you an example of what I mean from a very recent scenario. So Drew was at a youth retreat a few months ago, and there was structured free time in the afternoon. And what they did during the structured free time was they had someone come in to lead a game with all of the high school kids. And the youth leader said that all of the students had to participate in this game. And the game started, and I also lead youth girls, and so they were there as well. But I'm watching this game. It's extremely chaotic. There's balls being thrown everywhere. They're laughing. They're having fun. It's wonderful. It's a great game. But I'm looking around, and I can't find Drew. He's nowhere to be seen. And so I'm like, well, they were supposed to all participate, so, where is he? And so I started walking around and looking in the different, the classrooms, and I found him all by himself, sitting completely by himself in the quiet, on his phone, doing, something that would kind of self-soothe and keep him busy, but wasn't part of the group. And so, what I would have suggested, he was on sensory overload, and I also have sensory issues, and so even for me, I was like, oh my gosh, this is really loud, and lots of things are going on. But in that situation, I would have suggested that they plan for 2 activities. So one where kids could play the loud game, and then another in a different classroom with a quieter activity. And I know that Drew wasn't the only one struggling with participating in that game. I had a few of my youth girls actually hide in a classroom. And we kept having to coax them out, come on, Molly said you'll have to participate, and they were so uncomfortable. And these were girls who did not have autism, and they were not comfortable with that game. And so I say this to say, I know that you guys have activities and events where there are, I don't know exactly what it looks like here. And I know that you guys do have youth and things of that nature. And so I talk a lot about kids just because that's my experience, but it's not just kids. It is all individuals who have sensory disorder, who have autism spectrum disorder, who have lots of different disabilities that could really benefit from activities being designed where there are options. There are options and consideration for individuals who may have struggles with loud noises or chaos and that type of thing. So this also, it kind of relates to a concept called universal design, and you can look this up, but it's a principle that's utilized in a lot of different places. But what universal design means that when you are designing spaces and activities and areas that you are considering all types of learners and all types of, of individuals and the way that they react. So to summarize, just some practical ways that you can increase inclusion for individuals with disabilities in your community. First would be to create inclusive spaces like sensory-friendly rooms and quiet spaces, which I know you guys already do that with the library and the places that you have available. But thinking about spaces with low lighting or calming activities. Another option would be to offer noise-canceling headphones. This is so easy to have on hand. I was at another event. I'm not trying to call out my community. I love my community. They're amazing. But there's lots of youth events, and it was super loud, and they're jumping, and they're doing the music, and it's wonderful, and they're praising God, and it was great. But it wasn't great for Drew, and so he's at the back, and he would walk out, and so I asked the leader, I said, do you guys have any headphones that he really it helps him with the headphones? And they didn't, and she brought me cotton balls, which was helpful. It was great, but it just wasn't the same. And so it's not that hard to have things on hand like noise-canceling headphones that could support your individuals, your community members with autism. There's other things you can do, providing visual aids, establishing support systems. I know there are grandparents in here that probably have grandchildren with autism. There are moms, there are dads. And I will tell you, one of the most impactful thing I've ever experienced was being in a book study with a group of mothers who had children with autism. It was so powerful. It was my support system. I think allowing people to come together to learn more about individuals as a whole, not just, not just individuals with disability, but all of us to learn so that we can be more inclusive. And then partnering with other organizations in the community. I believe one of your is it Adrienne? Does she here with the Acing Autism? Or is that?
She used to.
She used to. Okay. Well, there are organizations around that really work to include people with autism. So one I was going to bring up was Acing Autism, and it's a tennis thing where all the kids come and they all have autism and they play tennis, and it's really fun. So there's lots of different organizations in the community. And then just to develop programs and events that encourage universal design and inclusion of all. And universal design is not just good for one population, it's good for all populations. So that's where I'm going to stop. I don't know if, how much time we have or how you guys, kind of end these things, but if you have questions or ideas, if we can't ask them here, we can talk after at lunch. And so I am so blessed and thankful that I got to be here and to speak with you guys, and I hope you learned something. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And would you like to, we can hand out those diagrams if you'd like.
Yes,
and
I
pass
only
them around.
brought a few, but if we want to pass them around, we
That
can
sounds great.
do that.
Amazing. Thank you. And also, I think you should be first in line for lunch because we have a community that loves to ask questions.
Okay.
So we want to make sure that you get food.
Okay.
And then after she gets food, you're welcome to bombard her.
Okay, all right.
So thank you
And
so
I will
much.
tell you one thing as a teacher, if I do not know the answer, which I don't know all the answers, I will find the answer for you. So, thank you very much.
In Judaism, to say great job or we learned a lot or we had a wonderful experience learning from you or learning with you, we say yasher koach. So yasher koach, thank you for teaching us. At this point, we are going to